So how did you get your start as a gaffer? How did you get into filmmaking? Where did that all start?
Well, it's a everyone's got a different route in. I knew nothing about filmmaking, nor did I have any interest in it really. I liked the movies and everything, but I was an engineer for Shell on the oil rigs, and we were testing the rigs before they went into production in the North Sea. So I had 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off, and the electrical engineering side, we got ahead and mechanical guys had fallen behind. So they gave us 8 weeks off, which I'd never had 8 weeks off in my life before that. On full pay, everything was fine. So after a week or so, I got very bored of hanging around. I couldn't go away because my then wife was working, so she couldn't get the time off. So after a week or so, I got very bored and I saw an ad in one of the local papers, one of the London papers, electricians wanted for a film studio. Although I'd long moved on from being an electrician, I'd gone to college and got an engineering qualification. So I thought, well, this will stop me having been bored for a few weeks. And I applied for the job. I went and had an interview, and I got the job. And so I was paid by Shell for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I was also working in the film studio. And when the message finally came to me that I was on a flight up to Shetland on Tuesday, it always was a Tuesday morning, I declined the kind offer, and I never went back on the oil rig. So that's basically how it was. That was about 1980, 79, end of 79.
How was that experience like for you, from going from an oil rig to a film set and working as an electrician and a gaffer on a film set? What was your first? What were your first thoughts, and what did you think when you walked on and started
Well,
working?
every film set for a gaffer or for any head of department in grips or anything like that is a heavy engineering job. So it was a matter of applying what I knew from my past training and experience and applying it to working on the set. But I didn't understand cameras, lenses, film speeds, lighting, how the aperture affected depth of field. I knew nothing about any of that. But there was a bookshop in a part of London called Paddington. It's long gone out, this bookshop, but it had a whole section devoted to film. And I used to go there once a week and just browse through them. Some of these books, even in that time, in the early 80s, were 70 or 80 pounds, which was a lot of money then. Still a lot of money for a book, I think, but it's all online now. You can research your way online. It costs nothing, and it's there's so many articles by cinematographers and people. So, but in those days, it was very hard to get knowledge other than getting it on set. And some DPs were fantastic. They loved to have questions asked. And when I got the opportunity, I would ask the questions, and most of them were very, very helpful and explained things. And that's the basis of it. I learned most of it on the job. And I was very lucky because within a couple of years, there was a new TV channel going to open in the UK called Channel 4 television. It's still going strong. But they commissioned a lot of 1-hour dramas, short films, from start to finish. The director had 3 weeks to shoot this film, 2 to 3 weeks. Maximum was 3 weeks, but if they got it done in a quicker time, they had more time for editing and everything. So they wanted to shoot it as quick as possible. And it was fantastic. And I met some great DPs whilst doing that. And one of them was Roger Deakins. And he said to me, the industry was dominated by a couple of big companies here, and the gaffers were employed by the rental houses. Very few freelance gaffers around. And Roger asked me, I'd done a few of these little dramas with him, and so he didn't do commercials, and to my knowledge he still doesn't, but he did a lot of videos for MTV and stuff for a big rock bands and stuff like that. So we'd done a lot of those together. Some of them very big, big budget, and he said to me, "I've got a film coming up, my first one on 35mm. Would you be interested in doing it, or could you do it?" I said, "I guess so. I'd need the support of the production to not have a gaffer from one of the rental companies foisted upon you." And that was it. The film was 1984. So the deal with 1984 was it had to be shot, edited, and released in that year. That was, so I think it came out October, November. We started shooting in February, March, into the summer. And that was my first 35mm feature film and it was with Roger Deakins. And so we go back a long way, and he trusts me to still give me a call when we get an opportunity to work together. But so it's good. But eventually somebody has to trust you to do a job. And the same applies to a DP, I expect. When a director sees his work, it's a matter of trust. So it's something that you must have in the back of your mind all the time. If somebody trusts you enough to put you in charge of the lighting on a feature film, you must do everything in your power to support that person, and give him your best, or her your best, the best performance that you can. You can't leave things to chance. And today, if I get offered a film with a DP I know or with someone new, I'm as nervous and as worried then as I was all those years ago. If you ever lose that, you become complacent, and I think it's the slippery slope downhill.
It's the thing I always tell the film students, when they ask me questions and they keep asking me as if I know everything, and I say, no, I don't. My key grip, there's sometimes I go on a set and we have to design a crazy rig, or I have to design a way to get the light in a place, and he comes up with these intricate ideas, and I sit back and go, never would have guessed to ever do something like that.
Yeah, you have to be open and receptive to people's suggestions. Sometimes they're downright stupid, but you don't tell them that. You say, well, listen, we'll have to rethink this. And I've worked with cinematographers who've been halfway through lighting a set, and then they just say, listen, this is not going the way we wanted. We'll have to start again. And I have absolutely no problem with that. There comes a time you think, this just doesn't work. Let's take a step away. That's why I'm a great believer in testing, in preparation, in pre-lights. I don't like to leave things to chance. And the best cinematographers that I've worked with agree with that method. If you haven't done your homework and your preparation, and it's even down to a little torch or a hand prop that we have to make practical, as in 1917, those torches that the soldiers carried, they were very organic. The model makers handed us the torches with that semi-spherical lamp, and these were authentic in size and in weight, everything. They were the real deal. So when we looked at them first, we realized that we have to have remote control on them. We can't. The actors have got enough to think about without having to switch them on and do stuff like that we could do it on a cue. So to cut a long story short, we need a bit of life in those. By life, I mean, they can't last 5 minutes and then you got to change batteries. They had to be completely self-contained as a unit. So I don't know how to design a radio link or stuff like that, but I know people who are very good at this, and I've known them for years, and I always call on their expertise. The other thing as well, to give them a longer life with a good output of light, we had to go the LED route. So I know enough about LEDs to know where not to look, but I got a couple of, one in particular, a friend of mine, to show me what's available in warm LEDs. So eventually we came up with a prototype, took it to Roger, and then over the next few weeks we modified it. We made it that it was controllable from the main Grande May desk via a slave desk. So we could switch them on, change the output, and do everything without having to go near the actor to do it. So you never know what challenge is coming next on a set, and you have to know how to address that, and find, if you don't know how to do it, find the right people who can build you the hardware and suggest methods, and then you test it, and you test it to destruction if necessary, So we built a prototype, which cost several £1,000s. It's not cheap when you get into high-end electronics. And then we just switched it on, and we left it on to see how long a particular battery would last. And having been caught out in the past, as many gaffers probably have, rechargeable is fantastic if the discipline's there. But it always makes me incredibly nervous using rechargeables because people forget, and you can't zap charge them very quickly. So I decided to go down the route of non-rechargeable. And eventually, after some research, I found these non-rechargeable batteries, which gave us a 2-hour. The nice thing about using an LED as a source is they have a critical voltage. They don't change in output or color or anything. When they reach their critical voltage, they just go off. So that, whereas if you're trying to run tungsten off batteries, you have to monitor the voltage all the time, because as the voltage tails off, the lamp will still work, but it'll start to go warmer and warmer. So you don't get the consistency of output like you do with an LED. An LED is not the answer to everything, but they're a tool that can be used to great advantage. And we use these LEDs were Cree. After they were the best. They ran at 2800 Kelvin, but because they were relatively cool, we could warm the back of the lens with a CTO or a CTS. So the thing was, the heatsink was, the thermal management of an LED is the life of them. If the voltage goes below critical, the LED goes off. But also, if the LED gets too hot, it just goes off. So that was another challenge we had with such a small housing. We had to get the battery, the driver, and the control into that little box. And I think they worked very well. They didn't let us down. We had no embarrassing moments with them. So we had 2 actors with 2 lamps, but in fact, we had 6 identical lamps, all in different channels. So we could just bring the next channel up, hand the actor the lamp, and fault find if there was an issue with the other one. Sometimes there would be a small issue, but we never got let down. And that was weeks of testing, modification, doing the optics, the little thing. We had a good relationship with the guys who built it, the model makers, and they graduated the diffusion into by shot blasting the glass front. This is all part of the job, and it's an interesting part of the job.
When does that discussion start for you? After you get a script, you talk with the cinematographer about, like 1917, you talk to Roger about what you guys want to achieve and what you want to do. When does the discussion about equipment start, and when do you actually begin creating these ideas and start testing them and beginning to implement
as early as possible, really? When I did Skyfall, I'd used big LED panels before on gravity. So I knew there were weak spots, and I knew the strong spots. I also knew how to manage them and the technicians that came with them. There are different philosophies in different companies, which I won't go into in great detail for obvious reasons, but I found a company who were very supportive and didn't mind my guys touching there was a company I worked with once that wouldn't allow us to touch them in any shape or form, which limited us a lot. So anyway, I was finishing on a film with an American DP, Kramer Morgenthau. We did a thing called Thor: The Dark World. So I was hoping for a couple of 2 or 3 weeks off at the end of that, and we had rented a little house in Morocco, my wife and I, and some friends we were going to spend. So Roger said, we have to get these LED screens for Shanghai. I'd got the script, and I'd gone through it, and we talked about it. And we hadn't been to Shanghai at that point yet, but we hadn't had a recce. So I went and saw these guys and explained what I want to do. And I got the art department to build glass in frames on casters, 5 or 6 6x4 or something window-like things. And we asked the art department for a bit of media that we could project onto these panels. So we built it, and we had a few different bits of media which the art department supplied, and they came with a number across the middle embossed into the image. And the first image we put up was the blue squid or jellyfish, which you'll remember if you watch it again. It's in the background of all the sniper sequence. So that we thought, looks pretty good. And we put the 5 or 6 glass panels around the set. And so we picked up the reflection of the screens in them. And then we brought the director, Sam Mendes, on. And we were running the blue jellyfish. And he loved it. And we didn't tell it. So that was the start. And then he signed off on the blue jellyfish. The art department, it's very important to work with the art department and have a supportive art department. And that was Dennis Gassner on that film as well, the same person who did 1917, a fantastic designer. And he has a fantastic department. They're really cooperative and helpful to other departments. And if you can anticipate what you're going to need and go to them in time, they can incorporate it into the set. So that was very early on. So when I finished Thor, finished Thor on a Saturday, and I started on Skyfall on Monday. So I said to Roger, if we can put this to bed this week, can I get away for a week into the little place in Morocco? And he said, yeah. So we shot the test in that week, and I knew then that we were on the right road. And then there was another, these were very, very high definition screens. I think there were 5 or 6 millimeter screens, which is the gap between LEDs. The higher the definition, the closer the gap between the LEDs is. But then I was saying, well, maybe we could get a coarse one, and we found very large LEDs, which were a very coarse image. And so we built some of them and put media into those. And it was a very organic thing. And so, the earlier you get in on the project, it's usually dictated by the prep time. There are some DPs like me to start when they start, and others are a little bit, so I've started on some shows before the DPs because they weren't finished in time, and I just meet them for a beer or a coffee or something and say, where are we going to go with this? Have you any notion of how you're going to approach it? And so I would set up some tests. I cannot impress on people enough how valuable testing is. The most expensive test you will ever do is when you have 2 or 3 highly paid actors sitting in the trailer while you try and fix something that should have been fixed weeks before. And it's very unusual for that to happen. Producers, the sensible ones, are aware that if you can get a style or a look signed off on by the director before even the set is built on some occasions, then you're miles ahead of everything. So then when you turn up on the big set or the small set to start shooting, you have a methodology there already. And then when you see the rehearsal blocked out, you just, then you have just tweaking and stuff to do, but it should all be there beforehand in my way of thinking, and that's the way I work.
Another setup you had in Skyfall, which a lot of filmmakers look up to, was the burning church sequence at the end of the film. And there are pictures online of the way you set that up and what the set actually looked like. Could you discuss about how you went about setting that up?
The burning house in Skyfall, it was all done very similarly to fire effects that we normally use. We use Dino lights or maxi brutes, and from years of testing and everything, we use CP62 bulbs. If we use the spottier ones, it's tempting, then you can get a lot more directional and everything, but fire doesn't flare the lens the way a CP60 or CP61, I can't remember which the spot ones is, but so we stay with the CP62s. And the way I like to give a cinematographer is that we control every single bulb individually. So we have masses of dimmers. Now, through the years, the rental companies have modified the lamps that we can connect to them using what's called a SockerPEX system, which I don't know if you use in America. It's 6 circuits, which is ideal for the 24 and 12 and 6 light maxis. That if you're using a 24 light, you run 4 conductors to it, a multi-core cable connect, and you control every bulb individually. And the reason behind that is, and the more sources you have, the less likelihood you're going to get of a repetitive looking effect, that it becomes more random as fire is, and you can feather it out to the edges. It gives you total control of each lamp. And so that is a thing that I would recommend for fire effects, that you don't cut down on the channels. And the thing is, if you have to control every bulb, you can have it tapering to the outside. You can have it hotter on the outside, tapering it. You would never have a cooler center to a fire than, but if you wanted for some particular look or something, then perhaps you could do that. But you need the control, and for that you need a good desk operator who knows how to program this. And I'm fortunate that I do have access to a couple of great people, so. But you have to have a notion in your head of what the requirement is. And again, it comes from testing. I've never done a big fire rig on any film that we haven't tested in advance with most or all of the lighting in place. And there's always things will change. That you may have to move the lamps closer together. The programming may need to change. Mostly the operators can do it on the fly. The Grand MA is patched into an iPad or a tablet, and they can write in changes there and then in real time. So that's another reason for testing and pre-lighting. You get a camera crew is 4 people. You get the Alexa, whatever you're using, out, and you do it for real with the smoke, with everything from special effects, anything that's going to be there, and you shoot it. And then the DP, whoever that might be, has time to study it and see if they've got the look they want and if there's anything needs changing. And when you have individual control on every bulb, it means you can change patterns and everything very, very quickly. So, so the Skyfall rig was, I think, about 35 or 38 24 light Dinos, and it worked spectacularly well. And so that was the embryonic rig for the big one that was on 1970. The thing to remember is, if one was to filter all those lamps, your gel budget would be phenomenal, and you'd have to change it because they would burn and the wind would get into them and blow the gels off. So that I watched when I started first, DPs and gaffers struggling trying to put CTO around a 500 watt bulb. And I was perplexed by this, because I thought, why can't they put a bigger bulb in there, like 2 kilowatt or something like that, and then take it down to 30%, and you get the color temperature of, you can get 1900 Kelvin, you can get 2000 Kelvin, and there's, once you've set your upper and lower levels, there's no filters to change or anything, but you have to up the wattage to achieve this. You can't get that lovely orange effect with a bulb running on 100% and 80 to 100, say a flicker or something like that. It'll be white. It'll be white light. So you'll have to do the correction in camera or in post-production or something like that. So why not get the bigger bulb, put it in, and then run it at 15, 20%, and you get a lovely, realistic looking source from it. That's, I think most people realize that, but honestly, I saw the pain that some people went through attempting to gel a very hot bulb and then changing that every couple of takes, you know. I thought there has to be a better way of doing this, and I think it's industry practice now. That's what you do. You beef up the bulb and run it at 20%.
Nowadays, everything is switching over to LEDs, and people want to work a lot with LEDs now. That's something I've noticed as well. What are your thoughts on LEDs? You know, a lot of companies will come out with new technology, say they have the best CRI, this and that. What do you look for when you're looking at a new unit or a new light? And
well, for a start, the rental houses and the producers and production people, if they want to be a bit more environmentally friendly, they have to get on board with this. Because I know the capital costs of LED equipment. I own some, but with a business partner. But the thing is, the LED is a tool. Its power consumption is dramatically less than tungsten. But the capital expenditure of a tin can with a 5K bulb in it and a lens on the front, and an equivalent LED unit with all the massive electronics, I don't know the comparison. You probably know, as you own a rental house, to having a 10K Moll Richardson with a 10K bulb in it and a Fresnel and everything. And the equivalent with an LED in that. It's phenomenally more expensive to use LEDs. They're not fully there yet. The bicolor and multicolor stuff it's great, but the capital expenditure that a rental house has to deal with, they've all gone down the sky panel route, I mean, I've done a job where we've had 1,200 LED fixtures like sky panels. We couldn't get enough sky panels, so we went with Space Force's alternate sky panels, Space Force sky panel. The sky panels are a fantastic piece of kit for in place of space lights and stuff like that. There has to be a change in mindset, because the rental costs for the LEDs is going to be more expensive because of the capital expenditure in buying them. But where the savings are is in filters, in power consumption. The studios in the UK are less than pleased the fact that every production is now putting in LEDs rather than space lights. So it's gone from megawatts down to tens of kilowatts, you know. So there has to be a change in philosophy at some point. We're at a crossover between high energy tungsten lights and HMIs and stuff. But the amount of control that you get with the LEDs in color and stuff and output is fantastic. It's getting better all the time. But some of the production companies don't want to pay, and they beat up the rental houses on them. And there has to be a meeting of minds somewhere that they will save money on power consumption, they will save money on filters, but these devices are considerably more expensive than their more crude tungsten forefathers. So whilst I think they're fantastic, they're not there yet. If you want to put an open face 20K outside a window to get a lovely hard shadow on a wall, I've yet to see an LED that can actually do that. The Fresnel system doesn't work on LEDs like it does on a tungsten lamp, because you've got a black spot in an LED on the back somewhere. So if you look at, I went to the BSC show when was it? February, I think, this year in London. And I saw the Mole Richardson improved stuff, and they're getting there. But when you look at the big ticket LED lamps, the equivalent that say would replace a 20K, if you look into the lamp through your hand glass or take the level down that you can actually look into it, there's a black rim around the front. So the old-fashioned Fresnel, with that, you're wasting a lot of the energy. You have to be able to fill the front of the lamp. And that was always my argument, that you had the silver reflector behind the bulb, which gave you control on spot and flood and everything. I think that I didn't have enough time, because we were working that day and we went after work. So I didn't have enough time to go into it in more detail. But I saw a vast improvement in the Mole Richardson fixture with a totally different front on it. And I think it'll get there, but it's early days. You can't just stick an LED in an existing HMI or tungsten fixture and expect the physicalities of it and the design features of the lamp have to change with the light source. So, but they're getting there, but they're not the panacea, the be all and end all, where you've got the equivalent of a 10K or 20K that you can plug into a wall socket. Those days are not with us yet, I'm afraid. People will use 10Ks and will use 20s and stuff like that, because at this point in time, any rental house that would be prepared to scrap all their tungsten and buy in masses of LEDs, I think would be misguided at the moment, because the LEDs, whilst they're improving it all the time, what was state of the art 2 or 3 years ago could well be obsolete in 2 or 3 years' time, which the old tungsten and arc lights and stuff, they had a longer shelf life. It's the investment in LED technology and the willingness of production companies to buy into the additional costs as they see it. That's a little bit of a mountain to be climbed yet.
What would you tell young gaffers and filmmakers that want to get to the level you are? Any advice you would give them?
Don't ever suddenly think, oh, I know enough now, and get as much knowledge as you can. And you might remember everything that you've learned, but it comes back to you. Suddenly, when you're confronted with a situation, and you think somewhere in your memory banks, you think that might work. You must always have an idea, and then once you start, it'll spark other ideas with the DP, with art departments, with whoever you're dealing with. But you can never learn enough. Go to every show you can. If someone's telling you about a piece of kit, go and have a look at it for yourself. And I know people have told me about things in the past that this is going to change the industry. Well, the things that have changed the industry quite a lot in the last few years is the advent of LEDs, and they're continuing to change it. I mean, we couldn't have done those torches without in that film without LED technology, and you can exploit the LEDs to get different effects and things. But and the other big change has been digital cameras. You know, it's not sleepless nights for the DP waiting for a lab report, and it's there or it's not. So they're big changes, but you have to keep up with them and try and don't be afraid to ask questions of DPs or gaffers as to why they're doing a thing. I despair of some people that have been longer in the business than I have, and they still don't know why they're doing putting a certain filter on a lamp or whatever. They don't know, and they never ask. And I said, I've asked a few of them from time to time, has it ever occurred to you that you should ask? Well, it's not my job. The gaffer or the cameraman will tell me what filters to put on. But I said, wouldn't it be nice to know? Did you ever think it would be nice to know why you're doing that? And some people, no, that we'll plug it in, you play with it, you know. So, and whereas other people do ask. So I would say don't be afraid to ask. People are usually very kind and will tell you and give you an answer. And it'll usually be the best they can answer at the time. So.